The world was a blur of sand and sea, the horizon stretching endlessly in every direction. Dom Cobb lay on the beach, his body battered, his mind adrift. The waves lapped at his legs, their rhythm slow and hypnotic, as if the ocean itself were whispering secrets to him. His hand brushed against something in the sand, a small, metallic object. He picked it up, his fingers trembling. A spinning top. His totem. The one thing that could tell him if this was real or just another dream. Before he could spin it, strong hands grabbed him, pulling him to his feet. Men in uniform surrounded him, their faces stern and unreadable. They dragged him across the beach, their boots crunching against the sand, and into a grand, dimly lit room. The air was thick with the scent of incense, and the walls were adorned with intricate carvings. At the center of the room sat an elderly man, his posture regal, his eyes sharp and calculating. He held the spinning top in his hand, examining it with a curiosity that bordered on reverence. Cobb recognized him immediately. Saito. The man from the dream. Or was it the other way around? "Do you know where you are?" Saito asked, his voice calm but commanding. Cobb hesitated. The question echoed in his mind, stirring something deep within him. He wanted to say yes, to assert control, but the truth was, he didn't know. Not anymore. Days earlier, Cobb had been in a very different place, a dream, though at the time, it had felt as real as anything. He stood in a fortress, its walls towering and impenetrable, its corridors filled with armed guards. Beside him was Arthur, his partner, his confidant. Together, they moved through the fortress with practiced ease, their steps silent, their movements precise. They were here for one reason, to extract a secret from the mind of a powerful man. Extraction was Cobb's specialty, a skill he had honed over years of navigating the subconscious. But this job was different. The target was Saito, a man whose mind was as fortified as the fortress they now infiltrated. The dream was vivid, almost too vivid. The air was thick with the scent of gunpowder, and the sound of distant explosions echoed through the halls. Cobb and Arthur moved quickly, their goal within reach. But as they approached the vault, something went wrong. A figure appeared in the shadows, her presence sudden and jarring. Cobb froze, his breath catching in his throat. It was Mal. His wife. She stepped into the light, her eyes filled with a mixture of love and accusation. Cobb's heart ached at the sight of her, but he knew she wasn't real. She was a projection, a manifestation of his guilt, his grief. "You promised we'd be together," she said, her voice soft but piercing. Cobb tried to ignore her, to focus on the mission, but she was relentless. She sabotaged their efforts, turning the dream into chaos. The guards, once predictable, became erratic, their movements fueled by Mal's influence. Cobb and Arthur were forced to abort, fleeing the dream. Back in the real world, Cobb and Arthur regrouped, their frustration palpable. The job had been a failure, and they were left with nothing to show for it. But Saito had other plans. He tracked them down, his presence as imposing as ever. "I was impressed by your skills," Saito said. "But I need more than extraction. I need inception." Cobb's eyes narrowed. Inception, the act of planting an idea in someone's mind so deeply that they believe it to be their own. It was a dangerous, almost impossible task. But Saito's offer was too tempting to ignore. If Cobb succeeded, Saito would use his influence to clear Cobb's criminal record, allowing him to return home to his children. The thought of seeing his children again was enough to silence Cobb's doubts. He agreed, but he knew the risks. Inception required a team, a plan, and a level of precision that few could achieve. And then there was Mal, whose presence in his dreams was becoming increasingly unpredictable. Cobb's first recruit was Ariadne, a young architecture student with a mind as sharp as it was creative. He found her in a cafe, her sketchbook filled with designs that defied logic and gravity. She was hesitant at first, unsure of what Cobb was asking of her. But when he explained the concept of shared dreaming, her curiosity got the better of her. Ariadne agreed, and together they began to build. Cobb taught her the rules of dream architecture, the importance of stability and detail. But he also warned her about the dangers, about how the subconscious could turn against them if they weren't careful. Next came Eames, a forger with a knack for impersonation. Eames was charming, confident, and always ready with a quip. He could slip into any role, any identity, making him invaluable for gaining the target's trust. Finally, there was Yusuf, a chemist whose sedatives were the key to shared dreaming. His drugs allowed the team to descend into deeper layers of the subconscious, but they also came with risks. The deeper they went, the harder it would be to wake up. The team's plan was set in motion in a rainy cityscape, the first layer of the dream. The streets were slick with rain, the buildings towering and oppressive. The team moved quickly, their goal clear, to kidnap Robert Fisher and begin the process of inception. But Fisher's subconscious was not so easily manipulated. His mental defenses were strong, his projections aggressive. The team found themselves under attack, their carefully laid plans unraveling. And then, as if things weren't complicated enough, Mal appeared. The first layer was a battleground, both physically and emotionally. Cobb struggled to maintain control, to keep the dream from collapsing. But he knew this was only the beginning. The deeper they went, the more dangerous it would become. The rain fell in sheets, drenching the cityscape as the team pressed forward. The streets were slick, the neon lights reflecting off the pavement like shards of broken glass. Cobb led the way, his mind racing as he tried to keep the dream stable. Beside him, Arthur moved with precision, his focus unwavering. Ariadne followed closely, her eyes darting around as she took in the surreal architecture she had helped design. Eames and Yusuf brought up the rear, their expressions tense but determined. The mission was clear: kidnap Robert Fisher and begin the process of inception. But Fisher's subconscious was fighting back. His mental defenses were stronger than anticipated, his projections more aggressive. As the team struggled in the rainy cityscape, Cobb realized they needed to go deeper. The first layer was too unstable, too chaotic. They needed to enter the second layer, a place where they could manipulate Fisher's mind more effectively. The transition was seamless, a shift in reality that felt like stepping through a door. One moment, they were in the rain-soaked streets, the next, they were in a sleek, modern hotel. The air was cool and dry, the walls lined with polished wooden soft lighting. In the hotel, time moved even slower. What felt like minutes in the first layer was hours here. Cobb knew they had to work quickly. He approached Fisher, who was now disoriented and vulnerable. Cobb's voice was calm, reassuring, as he began to plant the seeds of doubt in Fisher's mind. "Your uncle, Peter Browning, is behind this," Cobb said, his tone measured. "He doesn't want you to know the truth about your father's will." Fisher's eyes widened, his confusion giving way to suspicion. Cobb could see the idea taking root, the first step of inception beginning to take hold. But before they could proceed further, Mal appeared. She stepped out of the shadows, her presence as jarring as ever. Her eyes locked onto Cobb's, filled with a mixture of love and accusation. "You're not supposed to be here," she said, her voice soft but piercing. Cobb's heart ached at the sight of her. He knew she wasn't real, but that didn't make her any less painful to face. "Mal, please," he said, his voice trembling. "This isn't real. You're not real." The team found themselves under constant attack, their progress slowed by the relentless onslaught. And then, Mal appeared again. She stood at the edge of the fortress, her figure silhouetted against the snow. Her presence was a reminder of Cobb's guilt, his unresolved grief. Mal moved closer, her eyes filled with a mixture of love and accusation. "You promised we'd be together," she said, her voice soft but piercing. Cobb's heart ached at the sight of her. He knew she wasn't real, but that didn't make her any less painful to face. Mal, please, Cobb said, his voice trembling. This isn't real. You're not real. But Mal wasn't listening. She moved closer, her presence destabilizing the dream. The walls of the fortress began to warp, the floor tilting beneath their feet. Cobb knew he had to confront Mal, to face the guilt that had been haunting him for so long. He approached her, his steps slow and deliberate. His heart was heavy, but his resolve was strong. Mal, I'm sorry, he said, his voice trembling. I'm sorry for what I did. But you're not real. You're just a memory, a projection of my guilt. Mal's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't respond. Instead, she stepped closer, her presence destabilizing the dream even further. The walls of the fortress began to collapse, the floor tilting beneath their feet. Cobb knew he had to let her go. He took a deep breath, his heart heavy but his resolve strong. I have to let you go, he said, his voice trembling. I have to move on. With those words, Mal began to fade, her figure dissolving into the snow. Cobb felt a weight lift from his shoulders, a sense of relief he hadn't felt in years. But the dream was still collapsing, and the team was running out of time. The team worked quickly, their movements precise as they planted the idea in Fisher's mind. The fortress was collapsing around them, the walls crumbling, the floor tilting beneath their feet. But they didn't have much time. The dream was collapsing, and they needed to wake up. As the team ascended through the layers, they faced increasing challenges. In the hotel layer, Arthur had to navigate a zero-gravity environment to deliver the kick. In the snowy fortress, Eames set off explosives to create the necessary jolt. Finally, in limbo, Cobb and Saito confronted their own mortality. Cobb helped Saito remember reality, and together, they woke up. The mission was a success, and Fisher decided to dissolve his father's company. Saito fulfilled his promise, and Cobb was finally able to return home to his children. The world was unraveling. The fortress, once a towering monolith of ice and stone, was collapsing into chaos. Walls crumbled, the ground heaved, and the air was filled with the deafening roar of destruction. Cobb stood amidst the chaos, his heart pounding. He watched Mal fade into the snow. For a moment, he felt a strange sense of relief, as if a weight he had carried for years had finally been lifted. But there was no time to dwell on it. The dream was collapsing, and the team had to move quickly. In the hotel layer, Arthur was in a fight against physics itself. The kick, a synchronized jolt to wake the dreamers, had to be perfectly timed. But the dream's instability had caused gravity to fail. The hallways of the hotel twisted and turned, defying logic. Arthur floated in zero gravity, his movements deliberate as he planted explosives to create the necessary jolt. He glanced at his watch, counting down the seconds. If they missed the kick, they would be trapped in limbo, a place where time stretched into eternity. In the snowy fortress, Eames was equally pressed. The explosives were set, but the collapsing dream made every second feel like an hour. Saito looked up, his eyes narrowing as he tried to focus. Cobb, he murmured, his voice frail. I've been waiting for you. Cobb knelt beside him, his tone firm but compassionate. This isn't real, Saito. You're in a dream. We need to wake up. Saito's expression shifted, a flicker of recognition in his eyes. A dream, he repeated, as if testing the words. Yes. I remember now. We were on a job. Inception. Cobb nodded, relief washing over him. That's right. We succeeded. But we need to go back. Your life is waiting for you. With Saito's memory restored, the two men prepared to leave limbo. Cobb spun his totem, the small spinning top that had become his anchor to reality. For a moment, he hesitated. What if this was still a dream? What if he never truly woke up? But then he thought of his children, their faces waiting for him in the real world. He couldn't stay here. Not anymore. The wake-up, returning to reality. The kicks came in rapid succession, each one pulling the team closer to reality. In the snowy fortress, the explosives detonated, sending a shockwave through the dream. In the hotel, Arthur's charges went off, the force propelling the dreamers upward. And in the rainy cityscape, the van carrying their sleeping bodies crashed into the water, the impact jolting them awake. One by one, the team opened their eyes, their bodies heavy but their minds clear. They were back in the real world, the mission complete. Fisher sat up, his expression dazed but resolute. The idea had taken root. He would dissolve his father's company, not out of obligation, but because he believed it was the right thing to do. Saito, true to his word, made a phone call. Cobs' criminal record was erased, his path home finally clear. The team exchanged weary but satisfied smiles, their bond forged in the fires of shared dreams and shared struggles. The return home, the Cobs Redemtion. Cobb stood at the airport, his heart racing as he approached customs. For years, he had been a fugitive, unable to return to the United States. But now, thanks to Saito, the gates were open. He handed over his passport, his hands trembling slightly. The officer glanced at it, then at Cobb, before stamping it without a word. The drive to his home felt surreal. The streets were familiar, yet somehow different, as if he were seeing them through new eyes. When he finally pulled into the driveway, his heart swelled with emotion. The house was just as he remembered it. A sanctuary of warmth and love. He stepped inside, his footsteps echoing in the quiet hall. And then he saw them. His children, playing in the backyard, their laughter filling the air. They turned as he approached, their faces lighting up with joy. "Daddy," they cried, running toward him. Cobb knelt down, wrapping them in his arms. Tears streamed down his face as he held them close, the weight of his guilt and grief finally lifting. He was home. Truly home. The spinning top, a symbol of ambiguity. Later, as the children played, Cobb sat at the table, his totem in hand. He spun it, watching as it whirled on the surface. The top had always been his anchor, his way of distinguishing dreams from reality. But now, as it spun, he realized something. He didn't need it anymore. Whether it fell or kept spinning, it didn't matter. He was where he belonged. With a smile, he walked away, leaving the top to spin on its own. The screen faded to black, leaving the audience to wonder, was it real, or was it still a dream? But perhaps the answer didn't matter. What mattered was that Cobb had found peace, and that was enough. Themes and Reflections. Inception is a film that lingers in the mind long after the credits roll. Its exploration of dreams, reality, and the power of the subconscious is both thrilling and thought-provoking.